Hey guys, it's Cody here, CBJE Tokyo. I thought I would give you a little bit of a background and a glimpse into what it is I'm looking for when I'm taking photographs, and a little bit of, I guess, my adventure when it comes to editing and developing the photograph. So my series Derive is actually the word derive. It comes from the French dérive, which has similar words in a lot of Romance languages, but we don't really have it in English, I guess. Um, to dérive means to drift, or to sort of float through the city, float through the world. Um, and it's a concept that I sort of discovered a long time ago. There was a French theorist, Guy Debord, who in post-war Paris, he found these the maps and the grids that sort of outlined the city were not really true to what he was experiencing, and so his way of wandering around Paris was to just take random streets. He sort of ignored the map, and for him, this wandering around the city was almost a new way of experiencing this place that we all live. And so for me, Derive here in Tokyo, I guess it is almost it's almost the postmodern capital of the world. I think in many ways, Tokyo has this layering of architecture and history that I don't think many other places can compare to. And so, in particular, this series of images I have here, I took these photographs the other night in near Tokyo Dome, um, near Korakuen Station, and so I had seen this particular building a long time ago, and I was quite inspired by the shape and just the geometry of it. And it was only recently that I was able to come back and take photographs of it. And so you can see I've already started playing with the colors on some of these, using kind of a cross process. Um, but for me, the thing that really drew me to this whole area was this dome. And so I think this was actually built in the 1980s, but only later was it covered over. So this is actually a stadium, um, and I could hear people. There must have been a baseball match going on because I could hear people inside the stadium. Um, but I was really inspired by how this almost organic alien structure kind of juxtaposes against this larger the station, this which is almost just utilitarian in form, and there's these sort of this paraphernalia on top, these like cell phone towers and air conditioning units, and then right underneath it there's these people in these little boxes. I think these are restaurants here, and so obviously I've started playing with the colors on this and trying to bring out some of that personality in these different sections, and you can see everyone in these through these windows here. Everyone is sort of boxed off, sort of in their own little world, and even further here, in the background, we've got this building, which I believe must be an apartment building because people are got the curtains drawn, and there's almost the light of televisions coming through, and so I was really drawn to that as well, because the rest of these buildings are office buildings which only have one or two floors illuminated, yet here people are living their lives. And so, as Le Corbusier said, the house as the machine for living. I mean, these people are living in the machine, right? And you can see it quite clearly here. And even further back in the background, there's quite a lot of dust, and it's summer at the moment, and there's a lot of dust in the atmosphere. So there's these buildings in the foreground, in the background, sorry, are also quite. They feel quite distant and quite desaturated compared to the foreground. So I think that was overall that was a really awesome scene to actually to preside over, and then to be able to take a photograph of it was really quite an experience. And so I took the opportunity to take a couple of photographs in this area. And so really again, what I was looking for is this focus in the middle, that sort of it's almost hidden. It comes behind the building here, and you're only getting a glimpse of it. I think it's very important to not be too obvious with what you are trying to show. I think it's important to ask questions and not give answers necessarily with your photography. I think again, I took this photograph. I was wandering around, driving around Tokyo. Yet, like, the discovery process, it almost starts when you get into the image and start editing it. And so, even the old photography masters, for all of them, it was the journey began in the darkroom, and for me, that's where I kind of come in as well with editing. And so I spend a lot of time in Lightroom, and then I also bring the image over into Photoshop and spend a lot of time adding detail, cleaning things up, adding highlights and other kind of features, just to give the image a bit of character and to discover the character that's already there. Because there is, each one of these windows, each one of these people here has a story to tell, and the overall humanity of this, I think, is very inspiring. This urban organism that we live in, and I mean, this is a totally organic shape here, and so comparing that with the blocks of these buildings, I think overall it's a very interesting shape. So the other thing I'm always looking for in an image is something that is going to be print worthy, and so I do a lot of prints up to A2 size, I guess, and you can go bigger than that. But I think when you're editing something, always keeping an eye for the best possible quality that you can, and so that goes from the very start, even when you're taking a photograph, making sure everything is perfectly focused and framed and all of that. But then also when you come into editing, making sure that you know your image. I think it's very important to know what's going on in your photograph, not just throwing a preset on it. Really knowing where people are, where subjects are, where your light sources are, and sort of discovering the personality of the photograph. Because there's with a large photograph like this, there's a lot of stuff going on, and you should be aware of where that is. So in terms of the color, I mean, I can show you a little bit of this. I mean, I always try and get the exposure and contrast pretty much correct in camera, so I don't have to play with that too much. Maybe I'll drop the blacks a little bit, maybe boost the highlights a little bit. But really where the magic happens, I guess, is in the camera calibration, which I can sort of relate to. I used to do a lot of astrophotography in New Zealand, so shooting galaxies and nebula, stars and things like that. And what you would use is actually a grayscale CCD camera. You would put a couple of filters on it, red, green and blue, and take 3 images and combine those in Photoshop. And so with that in mind, with the camera calibration, what you're actually doing is you're playing with the very settings for red, green and blue straight out of the camera. And I think that, maybe you guys have different ways of doing it, but for me that's really quite a good way to chunk it in and to block out really where I want the image to be. Because there's a lot of stuff you can kind of discover as you start playing with those channels and the calibration of that. And there's even, you can go and use older settings, the older camera calibration settings, to even get a different sort of feel for it. Then the other thing that I would look at is, of course, the split tones, which kind of you can give an overall color cast to the highlights and the shadows. So here I've got a bit of a blue overcast on the highlights, and then almost give it a bit of a red pink on the shadows. Again, not being too obvious with it. You want to be asking questions, not giving answers. Then you can play with the colors a little bit. If there's any particular colors that you want to emphasize, you can change those in the hue and saturation panel. I played with those a little bit here. I don't usually touch the tone curve too much for my derive images. I'm usually trying to shoot it in camera with the contrast I want, and if I haven't quite got that, maybe I'll be playing with a different angle, or trying to change position instead of trying to pull that out with the tone curve. Obviously, for other photographs, for other projects, that would be something that I would spend a lot of time with. But with Derive, I don't usually use the tone curve too much. Maybe give it a little bit of clarity just to sharpen up some of the edges. And then so there's a lot of stuff. I'd spend a lot of time. Maybe I'd create a couple of versions of the image, and just sort of see which one sort of works. I'll come back to it maybe a little bit later and sort of compare it. So yeah, I often come back to images that I've shot and edit them again. And this one I actually brought into Photoshop. Let me start up Photoshop. I actually was playing with it the other day with more of a subdued tone to it, so I can actually show you that. It's very big files, shooting 16-bit TIFF files. So this one here you can see is quite different to the one that I've got now. So this one's got a little bit more sort of punch to it. It feels a little bit more, it's got a little bit more color going on. But this one that I was editing in Photoshop, what I actually did is I created 3 passes. I created a just a base red pass and kind of pink red. Then I did an orange pass, which had a little bit more orange going on in the lights on the buildings. And then I'd put a mask on that, so I masked out some of the different areas just to get that color cast, that kind of marbled texture. And then I did the same thing for a bit of a blue texture on the dome itself, this organic structure here, just so I can make it be part of the world by bringing in that blue tone, sort of make it feel like it's part of the world that I've created here. And then I did a little bit of stuff just playing with just a bit of exposure on these trees. I added a little bit of highlight to this foreground. Pretty minimal stuff, and again, you know, it wouldn't even be that noticeable on Instagram, I don't think. But for printing, with an eye for print quality, the best image you can possibly create, I think it's really important to spend the time on that stuff. And so yeah, that's that's one version of this image, and you know, I don't know, maybe I'll come back and try some different stuff with it. I really like how this building on the right has this kind of ominousness to it, with just this one layer of lights, almost with a bit of blur on it. I love how there's all these apartment buildings here, or these rooms in this apartment which have different lights, and sort of, you know, each one of those has a story to tell, I think. There's a lot going on in this image, and I think I might come back and spend a bit more time on it. But yeah, I just wanted to give you guys an overview of sort of my thought process when I'm taking photographs and what I'm trying to create. So if you have any questions about the settings or anything like that, just reach out to me. But otherwise, thanks for watching.